Earth first. Hey, welcome, Facebook live stream listeners. We are so delighted to have you here. You are backstage on Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. This is, again, remember, you're seeing the makings of a show. So this is not going to be a perfect recording. You're going to see us actually recording an episode of Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. And you want to stick around today because this is going to be a wonderful show. My guest today is Kim Centera, the CEO and founder of TerraPro Solutions, and it is going to be an interesting show about sustainable energy. Kim, would you like to poke your head in so they'll get a sneak preview and say hi?
Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with Paula.
Yay, and you'll be meeting her and hearing a lot more from her in just a little bit. So I just again want to say, I forgot, we're not recording the show yet. See, you are backstage. You'll get to see the bloopers. All right, so right now we will begin actually recording the show. Okay, here we go. Start to go into my opening dialogue. And all right. Oh, I forgot to tell you, Kim. Our segments are 11 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay.
So I usually try not to ask you a question when it's getting too close, but you'll also be able to keep an eye on that so you'll know. Okay. Do you have your water? You have water. Yeah, okay, good. All right, here we go. Welcome to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. I'm so glad you're here today because we have an amazing guest joining us, Kim Centera, the CEO and founder of TerraPro Solutions, which is all about helping sustainable energy grow and flourish. So this woman's about making the planet a better place, and that is my kind of person. As you know, here on Change It Up Radio, we're all about helping people deal with change. And so we're either bringing information to you to help make change smoother and more productive, or we're spotlighting change makers out there, people who are doing some amazing things to help change this planet and help make it a better place. And Kim Centera, who will be joining us in just a little bit, is definitely one of those people. But up front, on the top of this show today, I am going to be making a little fuss about my new book. This book, called Saying the Right Thing When You Don't Know What to Say, I am so excited about it. I call it the little book that packs a big punch because it's a small book, and I purposely did that. I did that because I wanted it to feel doable. I wanted it to feel like you could just pick it up, get the message, and not have to devote 2 months of your life to getting through the content. There's a reason this book is so important to me, and that reason is that, for 27 years now, I've been a life transitions therapist. As most of my listeners know, I'm also an author and a keynote speaker. But in this work that I do in my private practice, I'm always working with people who are dealing with change and challenge and the upheaval that often comes with it. And that's a hard time for we humans. We like things to be comfortable. And sameness tends to produce comfort. But sameness also produces boredom. And so we have to have change. We have to have it for growth. We have to have it to keep ourselves interested in life. But, it always brings with it that discomfort of something new, something unfamiliar. Well, one of the things that also comes with change is often loss, because something's got to go in order to make a space for something new, right? And when loss happens, of course, we have all sorts of responses to that. We might get angry. We might get scared. We might be frustrated. We might be sad. There are all sorts of responses in that compendium that we call grief, those responses that we have to any experience of loss. So whether that is a death, a divorce, a move, retirement, all those kinds of experiences that change the way things were create loss. And when we're going through loss, it's a tough time. And one of the things that I have been hearing for over 27 years now from people who are dealing with loss and whatever their response to it is, too often I hear, nobody called. Nobody came by. Nobody at the office brought it up. I mean, I can tell you a true story of a dear friend of mine who suffered a miscarriage. And when I talked to her about it months later, I said, what was the hardest part? And she said, the hardest part was nobody brought it up. And so I could never talk about my pain because I didn't want to bum everybody else out. So this is a story that happens all the time, my friends. We don't want to bring it up because we don't know exactly what to say. And oftentimes the person who's in emotional pain doesn't bring it up because they don't want to be a buzzkill or they don't want to make you feel badly. So I said enough of this. I'm going to write this little book because I know the reason that people don't show up. And the reason they don't show up is because they don't know what to say or do. And they're scared. They don't want to hurt the person worse. They don't want to make the situation worse, but they don't know what to do. And so I have created in this little small book 5 basic steps that you need to keep in mind whenever you're going to be having any kind of difficult conversation. Now, this might be firing somebody, or it might be a tough talk with your teenage kid. I mean, there are all sorts of situations where we have to have difficult conversations, where we have to ask those questions or provide that comfort for somebody who's going through something difficult. And in this book, not only do I give you those 5 steps, but I actually give you lists of things that are helpful to say, lists of things that are not helpful to say, and I really hope people will pay most attention to that list. And then I also give lists of things that are helpful to say to the people who are going through the loss. Because here's the other thing that I know. The person who's going through the loss and the emotionally tough time often doesn't know how to respond to the things people say, because sometimes people do say the wrong thing. And it's usually because they don't know what to say. So they'll say something that they heard. They'll say things like, well, I guess God needed him more than you do when somebody has died. Or I had a client tell me that someone actually said to her, it's been 2 years now. Shouldn't you be moving on? In that sort of a tone. I had a friend who lost a child, and people said to her, well, at least you have other children. They don't know. They're not trying to do something awful. They're not trying to say something inane. They just don't know what to say. So my purpose in writing this book is to give people some concrete solutions about what to say. And here's another little piece of good news I want to tell all of you out there. Because I know most of us, when we sit down to help someone who's dealing with emotional pain, we want to fix them. We want them to feel better, right? We want to come up with a solution. The truth is, when people are going through difficult times, the really valuable solutions have to come from them. And the best way for them to discover those solutions is by talking about what they're experiencing. So the good news is you don't have to have a perfect solution. You don't have to be a fount of wisdom when you sit down with someone who's dealing with that pain. all you need to do is set the right intention when you go into the situation. And that intention, I hope, has a lot to do with being a comfort and a support, not advising, judging, or criticizing. Be present. It's so important that you're present because you have a different energy when you're present than you do if you're sitting with somebody and you're thinking about what you have to do later, or you're making the grocery list in your head, or thinking about that fight you had with your partner last night. So be present. Butt and brain need to be in the same location. And then you don't have to worry so much about what you say because you'll be present. You'll be feeling the circumstances. You'll be listening to them. And that's the next point I was going to make. You know, have this mindset that you're there to comfort, that you're there to support, that you don't have to solve anything, and then listen. So I begin this book by saying it's kind of strange that I have a book titled Saying the Right Thing when you don't know what to say. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is what you say doesn't matter nearly as much as that you listen. Because that's when people do their processing. That's when the solutions come to the fore. When you're listening, you're present and you're doing what we call supportive listening. And then the final thing to keep in mind is when it is your time to speak, when it is appropriate to say something, respond from your heart, not your head. When people are dealing with emotions, what they really need most is your humanity, not your database, not all those cool things that you thought of to say or the stuff you know or the experiences you've seen other people have. Because remember, everybody's circumstance is unique. Everybody's pain is unique. So we can't pull out any prefab solutions. It's not going to work. But if you're present with this person, if you're actually really hearing what they say, then the right things will come to you. The right words will come. Your own humanity will be present, and then maybe you want to share something briefly. Don't take over the conversation, but maybe share something similar that happened to you so they develop a little sense of connection and don't feel so alone. Isolation is not a good place for people to heal. So I want you to show up. I want you to be there. And this little book, I think, will help you to do that and feel really comfortable. All right, we are going to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to answer a couple of emails from people who have read the book and have some questions that they wanted to ask. We'll be right back. I'm going to scoot over a little bit. There we go. Thank you. Okay. Todd, I'm about to bring us back.
Okay.
Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. If you're just joining us, I have been talking today about my new book, Saying the Right Thing When You Don't Know What to Say. And I was mentioning I'm very excited about this book. It's a passion project for me because for too long I've had people saying to me that nobody talked to them. Nobody came by to visit them when they were hurting. And I think that reason is because people don't know what to say and do, and they're just scared. They're scared to show up at all. So also I want you to encourage you to stay tuned because in just a little bit, Kim Centera, the CEO and founder of TerraPro Solutions, which is a company that's all about sustainable energy projects. And she's going to be joining us, and we're going to have a great discussion about her efforts to make this planet a better place. But right now, we're going to answer a couple of emails that have come in regarding the content of my new book. So my sound engineer, Todd is going to be assisting me by reading me those emails.
Yes, Paula. And our first email is from Melina.
Okay.
She writes, Paula, my friend just miscarried a baby in a pregnancy that wasn't easily created.
Mm.
She can think of nothing else but having a baby, and this has been devastating to her. She seems to be doing pretty well, and in fact, during a 20-minute phone conversation, she didn't bring it up at all. I don't want to upset her if if she's passed the whole thing, but part of me kind of feels like she must need to talk.
Mm.
What do I do?
Oh boy, it's almost like you read a chapter from my life, Melina, because I actually had a best friend who did suffer a miscarriage. And oh, I was there. I was there to pick her up to go to lunch, and I was there to tell her funny stories, and I was there to hang out with her. But and I will give myself a little teeny break here and say I wasn't a professional in this work at that time. But I never asked her how she was doing. I never said, how has this been for you? What kind of feelings are you having? You know, what's going on? What is your husband feeling? All those would have been really valuable questions because they would have given her a chance to process her pain. But in fact, earlier in the show, it was her story that I was mentioning that months down the road, when I asked her what was tough, she said nobody brought it up. And oh my God, I felt horrible because I was one of those people. And while I meant well, I wanted to make her happier, right? I didn't want her to be sad. But let me say something important to all of you out there. When people have suffered some kind of loss or some kind of emotional upheaval, they are thinking about it all the time. Your bringing it up is not going to be news. Your bringing it up will probably be a relief because what we forget is sometimes the people who are sad are worried about bumming us out. They're worried about being a buzzkill and talking about something that isn't a happy topic. I mean, we're all so good in our society at getting together and having a great fun time, aren't we? Yeah, we're great at telling jokes. We're great at, sharing our funny stories. We're great at all of that. We're great on social media showing our best side all the time. But not very often do we share our pain. And sometimes that's what really matters. That's what really connects us as human beings. There was an author a while back called Robert Bly, and I remember one of the things he said is, humans connect through their woundedness. So we've all had those experiences hanging out with somebody who's so much fun. We laugh the whole time. And then sometimes you sit back and you go, do I really know that person? And when you think about it, you really don't, because you never really had an exchange that mattered with that person. And sometimes the most valuable conversations, think about your own life. Think about some of the conversations that have ever meant most to you. And usually it's when somebody is trying to help, is sharing their strength, hope, and experience with you, and most importantly, is allowing you to talk about your feelings. So, Melina, I highly suggest that you follow your gut because your friend isn't over it, even if she's trying to put on a brave face for everybody. She's not over it, and she probably could really use a chat with a good friend. So go ahead and be there for her. All right, Todd, do we have another one?
Yes, we have. Our next email comes from Sandy, and she writes, Paula, one of my coworkers is getting fired tomorrow. I just heard about it. I know she will put on a brave face and not let anyone know how she is feeling. Do I go along with that facade, or is it better to try to talk to her about the truth?
I vote truth every time. And there's a lot of things that happen in the workplace when somebody gets fired. First of all, it's humiliating and upsetting for the person who's getting fired. So a lot of the times they will put on some kind of a facade. Maybe they'll act like they don't care, or they're glad, or they're upset, whatever it is. Or maybe they'll just try to slip out quietly. But if this person is your friend, the best thing a friend can do for another friend in pain is offer them a chance to talk. Offer them a safe space with someone who will listen to them so they can process what's going on. Because when we keep feelings inside, that's energy. It's very real energy. And it's energy probably that's confused or upset or agitated. And that's not the kind of energy we want to keep inside. When we can process it through talking with someone else, that is extremely valuable. Now, I'll make a couple of other suggestions too. Should you go through something in your life like getting fired or your boyfriend breaking up with you or getting some upsetting news about a job or a project, and maybe there isn't someone right then and there to talk to, then I would suggest doing something physical to get through that energy. You know, kickboxing could be great, especially if you're angry, but going for a run, taking a brisk walk, a bike ride, something where you're actually doing physical movement to move that energy through can be extremely helpful because it's very real. It is there. But if, wherever you are, you know what, guys, the holidays are coming up. And I'm telling you, for people going through any kind of loss or sadness, this is a tough time of year. And it's especially tough because everybody looks so happy, right? Everybody is into it. The holidays are coming, the parties are happening. And if you're not in that holiday mood, you feel so alone. So if there's someone that you see at the office or wherever you go, especially if it's someone you know and you know fairly well, and you think something's up, take the opportunity to ask if they're okay, to ask if there's anything you can do, to say you seem a little sad or you seem like you're not quite yourself. Is there anything I can do? Because trust me, most people won't walk up to you and say, I'm feeling sad today, or I'm so upset about something that happened, I need a friend. Some of your best friends will do that if you have that kind of relationship, but so many people won't. So many people don't want to be a burden, and so they're not likely to let you know that they really need that conversation. They really need to talk. So yeah, Sandy, if you have that opportunity tomorrow when this all goes down, then be there. Ask the question, are you okay? That was probably tough. Do you want to talk about it? Those are some things you can say. And if they don't, I don't know if I want to talk about it. I'm so confused. Right? You might say, I don't know exactly what you're feeling, because none of us really knows exactly what someone else is feeling. But you could say, but I had a situation like that once, and I could tell you how I felt. And now you're offering them the opportunity to engage in conversation. Always try to keep your story brief, because this is about getting the other person to talk. But now you've established some camaraderie. You've established a connection that they're not the only one going through this. So, and that can be extremely helpful. Because when we feel like we're the only one, nobody else feels like this, or why can't I get over it? What's wrong with me? And believe me, I've heard all those things from people in the course of counseling them. So when you feel that way, it's a hard place to heal. It's hard if you think you're alone. But if you know you've got that backup system, if you know your buddy is there, if you say, wow, I really need to chat, then that helps so much. So if you have the opportunity to be that person, go for it. Because somebody's whole life may be changed by what you do. All right. Now, speaking of lives being changed by what somebody does, we are about to talk with Kim Centera, the founder and CEO of TerraPro Solutions. So stay with us, because we're going to be talking about sustainable energy, which is one of the most important things going on this planet right now. And we're going to be also finding out about careers for women in the sustainable energy industry. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Kim Centera. Woohoo! All right. Oh, good. All right, I can take these on out. Thank you, Todd. You were amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, now, Facebook live stream audience. The beautiful Kim Centera.
Am I in the right spot?
You're in a perfect spot,
All right.
I think. Great. Yeah, for sure. All right, let me have a sip of this. And let me grab your bio and put my eyes on.
Okay.
Here we go. This is going to be so great because I actually have a lot to learn from you today. I don't know all these answers, so I'm looking forward to it. Okay.
Thank you.
Here we go. Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. And as promised in this segment, we are going to be talking with Kim Centera, the CEO and founder of TerraPro Solutions. This is a company that is a leader in the development of renewable energy projects and a champion, get this, ladies, of women in renewable energy. Kim began her career in renewable energy over 25 years ago. I didn't even know people were thinking about it then, thank goodness. And today she oversees an exceptional team of professionals who provide turnkey project development solutions for renewable energy utilities. And nearly all the employees of TerraPro are women. Woohoo! We like to interview change makers on this show. And Kim, you are certainly one of those. So I want to take this back to square one for my listeners. First of all, what is renewable energy?
Well, renewable energy is typically involves wind, solar, and now even battery storage projects as a result of the recent mandates in California. Commercial scale projects. So for our typical utilities that we're familiar with, like San Diego Gas and Electric.
Mm-hmm.
And these would be projects that are either acquired or developed from the greenfield stage and then put into operations so that they can provide energy and power to the users. So users like us.
So what is the greenfield stage?
Well, greenfield stage typically means that you're starting development of a project from its inception where perhaps there's been no project previously developed. It could be in an area or a county, or it could even be in a particular jurisdiction. So,
okay.
yes.
So give me an example, Kim, of like who comes to you and what kind of a project do they need your help with?
A lot of our clients are in various different sizes, but in the energy space, but they are looking to perhaps identify an ideal location for a project. So we will look at transmission, we'll look at interconnection, we'll look at permitting and environmental aspects. We'll help them identify land, locations, and then we will take them through that development process, very similar to a typical commercial process, but in our case, we're focused on an end use of energy. So it would need to be ideal for the location of a solar or a wind project, which in a lot of cases we find are more in more rural settings as opposed to urban settings for the most part.
For sure. So if I want to start a wind farm, I might come to you and say, I have no idea where to do this. I don't know what the wind conditions are. I don't know what the laws are. And you are the person that can help me with all that, finding the property and knowing all those other things?
Yes, really. In fact, I just wrote an article about repower, which is similar to greenfield. You need to look at all of those different aspects. One of my employees at TerraPro actually was involved in the permitting for the first meteorological tower in San Diego, which is a tower that measures wind. And the process of getting that tower approved took about a year and cost almost $1 million.
Oh my gosh.
And so this was supposed to be a ministerial permit, and it involved appearing before the Board of Supervisors, and it was a very lengthy and extensive process of getting the community and the governing body, familiar with this tower and what was going to be done. So that's just an example of the types of things that we, undertake when we're working with a client to try to help them understand the regime and what to expect. Now, if you're out in Palm Springs or perhaps other areas where you have legacy projects, then you certainly are going to have a different reception.
And what is a legacy project?
The Altamont Pass, Tehachapi Pass, Palm Springs are considered a legacy wind areas, wind regimes, just because there's been projects out there for 25, 30 years in a lot of cases. So when you're evaluating a project and you might be comparing a greenfield project where there's never been a project with a jurisdiction like that where the permitting is known, the communities are familiar, they're accustomed to seeing wind turbines or whatever it might be, then you're going to have a different process for your project than you might have otherwise.
And would it be a little easier maybe since the groundwork's already been laid?
Certainly it would be easier, correct. And we try to help our clients understand what that process is going to be. And certainly if you have a precedent, then you can look at that. And a lot of those, your laws are known, setbacks are known, permitting is known, environmental. Some of these pieces that we need to understand are much more readily identifiable.
I see. So I find myself wondering, because I'll be on 395 pretty soon, taking a trip, and you see the windmills, and you see, now I'm seeing, are they called solar farms? All those solar panels?
Projects, right.
Solar projects. Right. How much usable energy really comes from those means?
Well, on the commercial side, it can be 200,000 or 300,000 homes. It just depends. Wow. On the size of the project. I mean, certainly in different areas, we work on anything from 2 to 5 megawatt projects all the way up to 250, 500 megawatt projects. So
to put that in perspective, like how many megawatts does it take to turn on lights in San Diego?
Well, typically on that scale, it's going to, you're probably talking about kilowatts. Most of, if you're talking about the average vehicle, then you're measuring in kilowatt usage. So it's a much smaller.
Oh,
right,
okay.
right. So when you start to talk about megawatts, that's a much higher volume usage. And then as you go up, of course, then you move into more of a commercial scale.
So most of our energy still comes from what sources?
Well, fossil fuels, we're accustomed to that. Certainly natural gas, right. A lot of our energy. And, on the grand scale of renewables is still probably represents a smaller portion. But one of the advantages of renewables, having been around for as many years, is that it's much more price competitive than it used to be.
Oh, that's
so much more competitive with natural gas and that type of thing. So.
And what about the impact on the earth? I mean, because fossil fuels, they came from the earth initially, right? And gas comes from the earth. But what's the impact versus, let's say, something like wind or solar?
The impact in terms of fossil fuels or renewables?
Yeah, I mean, are we hurt? Obviously, we must be depleting the amount of fossil fuels, right? I mean, someday the oil could run out.
Right. Well, I think it's a different emphasis, right? I mean, California has passed SB 100 and SB 700. And with the 100% renewables by 2045, the goal is to move to zero carbon. And when you look at the stakeholders in California across the board, so businesses, universities, all of our different parties that are concerned, climate change and water are the two biggest concerns in California. So certainly the governor's response and these mandates that were passed, I think, are to address that. So I think it's a very important part of looking at our state and where we want to go, and creating a better a better earth and for our children. Really.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. That's huge. And I know there's a lot of concern out there right now about the nuclear energy and the nuclear waste and all of that. So certainly if we can be getting more of our energy from nice, clean methods like wind and solar, that's got to be a step in the right direction, right?
Right. I think so. A lot of it is about diversifying. When we think about, I read some staggering statistics really about the damage to a lot of our Air Force planes and everything in Florida from the recent hurricane. Oh. When we think about security, what's happening with all these fires, with all these hurricanes, it definitely represents a real change in our environment and our climate. And so I think addressing carbon fuels, even if you're not a big proponent of sustainability or renewables, I think we need to face the fact that our climate is changing. And there really is real evidence out there, even if we want to ignore the scientific evidence. Certainly what we're seeing in terms of changes, it's all around us. So embracing renewables, moving it forward is one way to help with reducing that carbon footprint and helping to clean up the environment.
Yeah, and that's so important. And especially here in San Diego, we're very concerned about methods that don't pollute the ocean as well, because that's a huge problem.
Right, absolutely. I mean, we're very concerned about water, and I think a little bit of our challenge, certainly working with our clients in California, is always the location of these projects. We have to be selective, and we always work together with the communities to try to make sure that the siting, all the sensitivities for locations, permitting, environmental, all those things have to be addressed. I mean, in California, it takes several years and many millions of dollars, really, to get a permit for these projects. So it's a very scrutinized process.
So it does take a commitment to want to go the renewable path because of this. There's money that has to be spent to make it happen, even though ultimately maybe, the energy that's produced is going to be less expensive and better for the earth. But when we come back from this break, let's explore that a little bit, Kim, and I'd love to talk to you about your emphasis on women in this career. So we will be right back. Okay. So,
am I okay as far as the mic and
yes,
all that?
perfect.
Okay.
Oh, and you know what? I want to remember to
Perfect.
Okay. All right. And then anything else that you want to bring forward or talk about, whether it's to do with TerraPro or this whole topic that we're talking about, or the women, anything? I mean, we'll get into the women for sure.
Okay.
Anything else that you really want to cover?
I'm just thinking. I mean, I'm going to be giving a talk in a couple of days about working in California and a lot of the aspects of working in California. So maybe I can touch a little bit on that.
Sure.
Some of the things that we're, helping people think about.
Okay. Okay. Let me just take a quick look at this. Okay. So just so I'm clear, Kim, what renewable energy, obviously, windmills and solar is part of all that. What else would be considered in that genre?
Well, traditionally, it's solar, it's wind. It's now to a lesser degree, it's battery storage. I mean, there's other.
That was the thing that I didn't know.
Right. I mean, there's other forms. We're not, maybe geothermal and some other things, but not working so much in those. I think predominantly you're going to see wind and solar.
Okay,
projects.
perfect. All right, then I feel pretty clear about that part.
Okay.
All right, my dear, here we go.
All right.
Welcome back to Change It Up Radio with Paula Shaw. And in studio with me today is Kim Centera, who is the founder and CEO of TerraPro Solutions. We're talking about renewable energy today, and that is a critical topic these days, particularly here in San Diego, since we have all sorts of issues that we're talking about now. We've got a nuclear plant not too far from us. We do have solar farms and wind farms and that kind of thing going on in our county. So we need to be informed. We need to know more about the pros and cons of what's going on today in renewable energy. So Kim joined us today so we can talk about that a little bit more. And her company, if you're just joining us, takes care of all of the basic work that would need to be done to find a location, I think you said, Kim. Take care of permits, look into, does the wind blow there? You know, that kind of thing for people who are trying to establish sustainable energy projects. So it's a very important company, TerraPro. And by the way, Kim, let's give your contact info if anybody's interested in learning more about TerraPro.
Yes, it would be www.terraprosolutions.com.
That's www.terra, solutions.com. So if you're somebody out there who is entertaining the idea of a sustainable energy project, this is the woman and that is the company you want to know about, because they can take care of all of that initial work that needs to be done to get that project on its feet, right?
Correct.
So here's something that we learned about Kim in our last segment, and I want to explore this a little bit with her right now. By the way, besides being the founder and CEO, this woman is very busy speaking out there in the world, educating people about this whole topic, and encouraging young women to get into renewable energy careers. So I would really love to know more about that, Kim. First of all, you started, was it 25 years ago?
I started 25 years ago working for a small wind company based here in San Diego, privately owned. And at that time, I had no idea that this industry even existed. So I was very surprised to learn, and I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to go into a great environment with very supportive management team.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that now as I look back, it was really the foundation for a lot of my career, having supportive management, especially men.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I had several pivotal moments throughout my early career where I had the opportunity to really test myself and see what I was capable of.
Uh-huh.
And I went for it. I
Good for
decided to pursue it. And so that really was, I think, now very pivotal for creating where I am now.
So share with us one of those pivotal moments. And by the way, were you like the only lady in the industry back then?
It's interesting you should mention that, because in those early days, there were very few women in the room, very few. Renewables is tied to energy, which is really tied to the utility industry, which is predominantly male, and then has a long history of more of what I would say kind of a governmental background.
Yeah, that's what I would think.
And so moving into renewables, I think, was certainly in the early days, you had to be willing to speak up and have a voice. It was very important. And sitting in a room of men, even if I wasn't confident, I had to be willing to have an opinion and express it. It was very important.
And that's a huge piece right there. A little while back, I interviewed Kathleen Kingsbury, who wrote a book called Breaking Money Silence. And we were talking about women and money. There's another place where it's tough to speak up, especially getting into those industries. And I think that's such a hard thing for so many women, because we were taught that, not officially, I think, and certainly the younger women are going to go, no, we weren't taught that. But in my generation, you looked to men for certain things. And women, I mean, when I went to college, and I won't say how long ago that was, it was a little while back. You were either going to be a teacher, a home economist, maybe a flight attendant, or a nurse. Those were the biggies, like you weren't going to college to get a law degree or become a doctor. Obviously, women broke through that at a certain point. But, when I divorced my husband back then, I couldn't get a credit card in my own name. Only a man could get a credit card. So I can imagine 25 years ago, when sustainable energy is probably a pretty new concept even, there you are in a room full of guys. That would be almost like, being with a bunch of lawyers way back when not too many women had done that, or other professions that we think, financial advisors, things that tend to be more dominated by men. It must have been a little scary on some levels, huh?
It was intimidating at times. And I think I always felt like I could prove myself by putting my actions in place,
Yes.
by the work that I did.
Yes.
People aren't really compelled by what you say. They're really compelled by what you do. And so, at that time, I was working on wind projects all across the United States. And typically, as I said, they're in very rural communities.
Yes.
So I would be out meeting with attorneys sometimes and working with landowners and very rural attorneys. And I think it's very important not to become defensive.
Yes.
You're in an environment, you're maybe the only woman, you've got to collaborate. You've got to figure out a solution. And I learned early just not to take things personally, that I have a job to do, be professional, I can come up with a solution. And in almost every case, if it started out difficult in the beginning, then if I was able to convert that person over, it was because of the work that I did. I kept on showing up, kept on working hard, stayed professional, didn't get defensive, and that usually made the difference in winning the person over to my side.
And I think that's great advice for any woman in any profession, really, but especially in one where you're breaking into one that's predominantly male. So how do you support women today in doing that? I know you're really all about getting them into this renewable energy industry.
Well, it's a good question. And my business is predominantly women. And I like to tell people that it really isn't, it's not a political statement. I really didn't start out saying I'm just going to hire women. But when I started to look at growing my company and I looked around at the smart people in the room, it really was a lot of really great women who I've worked with in the past. And I said, come and work with me. And certainly having a small business, all of my women that are working with me have left larger companies. But I think the other thing about working in renewables that I would, counsel women to think about is you have to be willing to take a risk. It's predominant in renewables. It can be a very volatile industry. But I think, the chances to succeed are great and make a difference. But you have to be willing to take a risk.
So what do you major in college if you want to pursue that kind of a career?
Well, certainly technical, there's a huge demand for engineers and anything technical. Lawyers, certainly business project managers, understanding, finding good mentors and understanding renewables and some of the components and pieces. There's a lot of great organizations out there. RISE, which is WRISE. It's one of the local women's sustainable groups. They offer some great programs that they just had one on repowering of sites, which was very informative. So if you search there's programs out there that will help you to find the right niche and where you belong.
That's so great. And people like you who are out there speaking and providing education for women who are interested in this career, right?
Absolutely. I mean, when we talk about pivotal moments, and you asked me about that earlier, and there were probably a couple of them, but more recently, like you, I had gone through a very painful and difficult divorce in 2011. And then 2012 came around. And after I put that behind me, I thought, okay, I'm just going to settle down and focus on my career. And at that time, I was working for a very large global utility. So I thought the rest of my career was set, only to find out that I was going to be laid off and the office was going to close. So it was really a pivotal moment for me, because I had to go through that. You talked about grief and change, all that I had to go through to realize that, and I was in my 50s. So, do I restart my life and my career? And that's what I did. I restarted. I took a chance on myself.
And is that when you created TerraPro?
That's when I created TerraPro.
Oh,
and
that was a huge pivotal moment.
It was. And I was just speaking at another conference recently, and I was telling the ladies that, thinking about that, I had a job offer for a very large company, and so it was either that or do I take the chance on myself? I mentioned the risk. And everything I'm doing now for myself, I could have done for that company, but then it all would have been for their benefit.
Yes.
And a lot of the women and the things that I've been able to do, I wouldn't have had that opportunity. So
risk.
Take
that risk.
So I took the risk, and here we are.
Oh, and I'm so delighted, to have had you here with me today, Kim, opening this door and giving a lot of great information to all the women out there and the men who might be interested in this career. So I thank you for being with us today. And again, that website was TerraProSolutions.com.
Correct.
All right, great. TERRA Pro Solutions. And that will also be in the show notes on ChangeItUpRadio.com. And if you want to learn more about my work, you can find that out at paulashaw.com. Thank you all for being with us. You can hear this show at 9 o'clock on Sunday evenings on AM 1170 or FM 96.1. And we are on every major podcast platform. And you can also hear the archive shows on ChangeItUpRadio.com. Please check out our Facebook and Instagram pages. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you want shows about. Thanks again for joining me today, Kim. And thank you to all of you. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. Let me turn that live stream off. And